I welcome you all back. Apologies that the bells didn't ring, and you might indulge me for just a moment, please, because I'm conscious that we're facing into an extremely busy parliamentary schedule with a number of very important items of business over the next number of weeks. However, before we begin today's session, I believe it would be remiss of me as Count Corlin not to make a few remarks on the issue of the Leinster House bicycle shelter, the infamous shelter, the cost of which has been rightly criticised since it was disclosed. Members of this House have received countless emails, texts and phone calls about the exorbitant cost of the shelter. Nobody can understand how a simple structure to park bikes ended up costing $336,000 of taxpayers' money. I know that I speak for everyone in this House when I say that it's a profound embarrassment and the depth of public anger is entirely justified. As many of you will be aware, the Office of Public Works is the landlord of Leinster House and other historic buildings. In recent past, they have done outstanding work on the restoration of George and Leinster House. I know the chairman of the OPW is preparing a report on the project for the relevant minister. However, as chairman of the Houses of the Oireachtas Commission, I've asked the chairman of the OPW to attend our meeting next week, where he will have the opportunity to explain and to answer questions. Specifically, it is important to find out why the value for money of the project wasn't queried when the cost became clear to the OPW. As public representatives, we don't get everything right, and we can be rightly criticised for some of the things we do. However, we understand that taxpayers' money must be spent prudently and carefully, and we know how galling it is for those struggling to pay their bills to read about excessive expenditure of this nature on a bike shelter in Leinster House. So let me say that whatever the findings of the OPW's review, lessons must be and will be learned, and there cannot be a repeat of such unwarranted and indefensible expenditure of taxpayers' money. As TDs elected to represent the people, we need to ensure that on their behalf. I'll now take leaders' questions under Standing Order 36. It's my pleasure to call on Deputy MaryLouMcDonald, please.
Gomagat, Count Corlin. Taoiseach, your treatment of children with scoliosis and spina bifida waiting for surgery is disgraceful. These children wait in agony for operations that can save and change their lives. And the longer they wait, the worse their condition gets. A race against the clock, a race against the child becoming inoperable and the prospect of permanent paralysis. And there are too many children in this awful situation. But today, I want to speak to you about one of them. Nuachtan cós Harvey Shirat Arish and Quis Scanalach a Cahar Lapóistí na scoliosis agus spina bifida orthu atá fannach na mblianta fada igor abroadi. Harvey Shirat has scoliosis and spina bifida. He's 8 years old. He was born in 2016, the same year you were appointed Minister for Health, Taoiseach. In 2017, when Harvey was just 1 year old, his parents were told that his ribs were crushing his lungs. In that same year, as Minister, you promised that no child with scoliosis would wait longer than 4 months for their operation. But you broke that promise, and children waited and waited. And Harvey has waited, and his condition has become life-threatening. 2 years ago, the curvature of his spine was 65 degrees. Today, it is 110 degrees. It's twisting his rib cage against his heart and lungs, making it almost impossible for him to breathe. Between October and Christmas of last year, Harvey was rushed to hospital 5 times, twice by ambulance, on one occasion on Christmas Day. This child desperately needs his operation, and yet his parents recently found out that he was silently removed from the waiting list. Taoiseach, Stephen, that's Harvey's dad, has told me that they've been pushed to breaking point, that it's utterly debilitating for them as a family to see Harvey treated this way. They feel powerless to help him. It's completely changed their outlook on life. His mother, Gillian, said the wait and lack of treatment is killing her child. Gillian has sent you numerous emails, Taoiseach, pleading for assistance to no avail. But late last night, on the eve of the return of the Dáil, she finally got her reply, an email in which you make no commitment to end the agony of their child. And of course, it wasn't your only late-night email, Taoiseach. Last May, you had promised to meet the parents of children with scoliosis and spina bifida. You still haven't met them. And late last night, they too received an email inviting them to meet you in October. This means they'll have waited almost 6 months to see you. Taoiseach, each day these children spend waiting is a day too long, never mind 6 months. And I'm sure Gillian and Stephen would have no problem telling you how much worse Harvey has gotten since you made that promise to meet last May. These children need their operations. All you've offered is review after review after review with no results or improvements. Parents are stonewalled again and again, and it's simply not good enough. These children wait and wait because of government failures, and it is your job to fix it. As Taoiseach, the buck stops with you. So today, I would like you to tell Harvey's parents and the parents of all of the other children when they will finally get their operations.
Thank you, Deputy MacDonald. Taoiseach, please.
Well, thanks very much, Cairns, and I want to thank Deputy MacDonald for raising this important issue. And may I say at the outset of my answer, Cairns, as you've said to us before in this House, very conscious of discussing clinical details, or indeed those of us discussing them that are not clinicians. And I say that in a general sense, but I say it in an important sense, because Deputy MacDonald asks me to provide operations when, of course, the decision to operate or not will always be a clinical matter. And I'm sure that's a view she'd share. Politicians don't order operations, clinicians decide when it's safe to operate. And I say that to be helpful and to be respectful to the role of a clinician and indeed to the situation of patients as well. But let me say this, I'm very aware of Harvey's case, and I have been in direct contact with the Chief Executive Officer of the HSE in relation to the matter, and indeed with my colleague, the Minister for Health. I hope that a further appointment can be made soon to clinically discuss the next steps in Harvey's care. I believe that to be important. And yes, Harvey's mum wrote to me. Yes, when we received the correspondence, my office immediately looked into the case. And yes, I responded with the information provided to me by the HSE. But I'm absolutely certain that what's vital here is a clinical consultation with the family. Yes, my office has been in contact with advocacy groups, and I do expect to meet them shortly. And at that meeting, it won't just be a meeting with me. It'll be a meeting with the new clinical lead for spinal surgery, a meeting with the Minister for Health, and a meeting with the head of the HSE. I very much regret that children can experience long waiting times for treatment. I'm conscious that the burden this places on them and their families, and I'm very conscious as a parent how any of us would do anything and go to the ends of the earth if our child needed any sort of treatment or care. Yes, when I was Minister for Health, I met with families on many occasions with children awaiting scoliosis procedures. I remember them. I remember their names, I remember their faces, and I understand some of what they're going through, but none of us can fully imagine that anxiety, that pain and that worry. This is an ongoing issue. It's affecting young children and their families, and we must do everything we can to help them. And I want to assure you that this government will and is doing everything we can to help them. I've had a very good meeting with the Minister for Health on this issue and with the Chief Executive of the HSE. I've met with the new clinical lead of the dedicated spinal unit, Mr. David Moore, and their teams. And I know that absolutely everything that possibly can be done to help is being done. And indeed, many of the issues you've raised in this House, I'll come to in a moment, have specifically been addressed since you previously raised them. The Minister for Health is chairing monthly meetings between the HSE and Children's Health Ireland aimed at improving waiting lists. A paediatric spinal task force has been established with an independent chair, Mark Connaughton, Senior Counsel, and this task force consists of all stakeholders, including patient representatives and clinicians, and we're committing significant additional investment to help improve services as well. And it's not just talk and it's not just reviews, because here's the numbers. We've already seen a very significant increase in the number of procedures carried out in 2022, and in 2023. And so far this year, over 300 spinal procedures have taken place. And behind each of those numbers is a child who's gotten an operation and been successfully treated in the Irish Health Service. We do have a dedicated paediatric spinal surgery management unit established by Children's Health Ireland, and that's working to drive continuous improvements. And a further funding of 1.34 million was allocated following a request from the new clinical need. This includes additional staff, a Saturday outpatient clinic, capacity for MRI scans under general anaesthetic to address waiting lists as well. We've also seen a number of reforms underway to further increase capacity for spinal surgeries, extending the operating theatre. A ring-fence theatre in Crumlin is now providing additional capacity as well. You've previously raised the issue, as have advocacy groups, around national outsourcing, and that's why we're now using capacity in CAPA, the Blackrock Clinic, and the National Treatment Purchase Fund. And we also have international arrangements now in place. We will do everything we possibly can to assist and make progress in this area. Of that, there is no doubt. It's not a resourcing issue. It's not a commitment issue. There are clinical issues, though, and the views of clinicians are always important in terms of care pathways, too.
Taoiseach, Deputy McDonald.
See, the difficulty is, Taoiseach, you haven't done everything that you can to resolve this situation. Harvey's parents, Stephen and Gillian, are in the public gallery. Just there. They shouldn't be here. The very fact that parents of children with scoliosis and spina bifida have to come to the Dáil in this way is a testament to failure in and of itself, because their child is running out of time. That's the reality, and it's not your child, Taoiseach, it's not mine either. It's Gillian and Stephen's child, and he's 8 years old, and he is deteriorating rapidly. And he needs and deserves the operation and care that he is entitled to. And it strikes me, and I'm alarmed by it, frankly, that you are going through the motions here, reciting the thing that you recite and have recited time and again when we have raised the issue of these very complex cases that can no longer be left on the never, never, because time is running out. So I'd like you, Taoiseach, now to make a commitment, not so much to me, but to the parents of Harvey, to Gillian and Stephen. They're a young couple, they're in the public gallery. I want you to tell them that their child will get the operation that he needs. I want you to tell him that the weight, that the stonewalling, that the prevarication, that the spin and sound bites will end, Deputy, and that the action will now be taken.
Thank you very much. Taoiseach, please.
You're better than that, or at least I thought you were, because the reality of the situation is you're asking me, as a politician, to give a commitment to a child to have an operation, regardless of whether a clinician believes that operation to be the best care pathway or not. That's what you're asking me to do. That's what you're asking me to do. No, Deputy, unless over the summer you became a surgeon, you're asking me to recommend clinical care pathways for an extraordinarily sick child. I want that child, Harvey, to get the best clinical care possible. I want Harvey to get all of the treatment possible. I want every child in Ireland, so does the Minister for Health, to get all of the care possible. And I believe the best way to progress these matters is through clinical consultation. And what I can absolutely tell Harvey's parents and tell all parents is whatever clinical care is recommended will be provided. But it's the clinical care that's recommended. And I believe that to happen. And when I corresponded last night with the family, that's the point I made. We're very happy for my team to talk to the family, very happy to help in every way we can. But ultimately, a clinical decision will have to be made here. And for you to suggest that there's some clinical lever that I can pull that I just couldn't be bothered pulling is insulting to parents of sick children. You're better than that, and sick children deserve better than that.
Thank you very much.
It's playing politics with the issue.
We go now to Deputy Holly Cairns, please. Deputy Cairns.
Margaret Cairns. Taoiseach, the report into abuse in religious-run schools is horrific. Hundreds of predators subjected thousands of children to relentless sexual abuse. Survivors described being molested, stripped naked, raped and drugged in an atmosphere of terror and silence. The abuse happened in classrooms, in offices and sports facilities. Some were sexually abused in their own homes by predators who had gained their families' trust. Nowhere and no one was safe. The scale of abuse is such that Gardaí are now investigating if it was organised and coordinated by paedophile rings. What we're dealing with is a scandal, of unprecedented and unparalleled proportions. These predators acted with impunity, were protected by religious orders, and they destroyed the lives of countless innocent children. The immense bravery of those who've come forward to tell their stories is inspiring. I want to acknowledge the two brothers whose courage in speaking to RTE about their abuse in Blackrock College opened the floodgates, Mark and David Ryan. Sadly, Mark died before this report was published, but his legacy is one of enormous service to this country. Mark, David, and all of the other survivors have shown incredible bravery and courage. Taoiseach, can you explain why the state has not? The reaction of the state to this and every other abuse scandal involving religious orders is one of cowardice. Yourself and fellow ministers have implored religious orders to think about their Christian values and their moral obligations to contribute to redress. Taoiseach, can we please stop talking about Christian values and moral obligations when we're discussing children being raped and investigations into paedophile rings in schools? Where is the legal obligation? Where are the criminal convictions? Why are these orders not being raided by Gardaí? Why are their assets not being seized? And why on earth are they still running our schools? It is unbelievable that successive governments' approach to these orders, which operated as criminal networks, is to roll over. We could be here today discussing legislation that would help us to hold these orders to account, but we're not. Taoiseach, we've had report after report after report about horrific child abuse carried out by members of religious orders, abuse that was deliberately facilitated and concealed by those orders. What will it take for the state to finally act and go after these orders with more than a pathetic appeal to their moral values?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Well, look, thanks very much, Deputy Cairns, for raising this extraordinarily important issue. Lives have been destroyed. National trauma has been unleashed. And I join with you in paying tribute to Mark and thinking of him and his memory today, his brother David, and indeed all of the survivors and victims who came forward. They have done the state an extraordinary service. And let me be really crystal clear, just in case there's any misinterpretation in any manner or means as to what you may or may not have heard me or any member of the government say in recent weeks. I was making the point that those who preach certain things should practice in that way. You left out the next sentence, but the next sentence is very important. The government takes nothing off the table in terms of what can and should be done in relation to this situation. The scoping inquiry, and I want to thank and commend Minister Foley for her work in this and the sensitive way she's handled this issue and worked with survivors, and pay tribute to her for that. The scoping inquiry is very, very clear in terms of the responsibility and obligation of religious orders to, quite frankly, cough up here in terms of redress. And we certainly shouldn't repeat the mistakes of the past in relation to this. So anybody who thinks, and I don't wish to speak about these matters in crude terms, anyone who thinks anyone's going to get off the hook here in relation to their responsibility and obligation, moral or otherwise, is wrong, and that is a misplaced view. What we want to do now is get the next steps right. The most important thing we have to do as a government right now is make sure that we put the correct mechanism in place in terms of the Commission of Investigation. Because I've heard what the survivors have said very clearly. They don't want to wait years and years and years and years and years again. This has destroyed their lives, as you rightly say. It's put their lives on hold. They want a process that's going to deliver for them. And you know what? Sometimes in this country we've done this well, and sometimes we have done it appallingly badly. And we need to get that right. Redress will have to be a part of that, but it is only a part of that because truth, justice and accountability is also a major part as well. You ask questions in relation to why do the guards not do this and why do the guards not do that. I don't and we don't in this House direct the Gardaí. But what we do know is the Gardaí have been extraordinarily clear in terms of asking people to come forward and indeed to make complaints and make statements. And I understand that that's already happened in many cases, and therefore there is a live Garda investigation into these matters as well. The scale of this is shocking, and you rightly say that religious orders knew. So did a lot of people in society. Religious orders knew, but it seems to me a hell of a lot of people must have known about this. The scale of this is so large that the idea that this wasn't known widely in society is just not a credible proposition for anyone to put forward. So be clear, Ceann Comhairle, be clear, people of Ireland, we will act in relation to this. We will have a full commission of investigation. We have decided that as a government. We will do it in consultation and designing it in the way that works for survivors, led by Minister Foley. We'll get this right. We'll work across this House to get this right. And we don't rule out legislation, legal change, or any action that may be taken to make sure people, for once and for all, step up to the responsibilities that they've been evading and running from for decades.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Cairns.
You said this government takes nothing off the table, and anyone who thinks that they'll get off the hook is wrong. But just for your information, that's literally just happened with regard to the redress scheme for mother and baby homes. The Minister went over cap in hand to the church to try and get a contribution and didn't get one. But I'm wondering if you're aware of a legal strategy that's being used by the Christian Brothers when survivors take a case against them. They're using a technicality to force survivors who want to sue them to name every member of the order from the time that they were abused. So this can mean having to find the names of up to 120 people. Oftentimes they have to go to the High Court to try to extract this information from the Christian Brothers. And that's just to start the case. So can you imagine how much it costs survivors to take them on? Can you imagine how difficult it is? Can you imagine the trauma that that's causing? So why is that legal? In Australia, when religious orders began using despicable defences to evade responsibility for child abuse in the court, the Parliament there changed the law. So Taoiseach, again, I'm asking you, why are you not looking at laws like this, which will actually deliver justice? Have you tried anything other than just appealing to the religious orders to use their, what you call, Christian values?
Have you, Deputy? Because this isn't just a debating chamber. You're a legislator, and anybody can bring forward legislation in relation to this House. So if you have ideas in relation to how you think the law should be changed, bring it forward. Bring it forward and we'll engage with you. Bring it forward. And thank you very much, because we're not just here to commentate on this most shocking national tragedy and trauma. We're here to actually come forward with ideas, and I've said to you very clearly, I don't intend to play politics with this or throw your words back at you in a way you tend to misrepresent mine. I was calling on people who call themselves Christian to act in accordance with their values. I also said that we're going to use every lever at our disposal to make sure these people get truth, accountability and justice, and nothing is off the table. I don't think I can be any clearer to survivors, but the only thing is I'm reassured that survivors understand what I'm saying, even if you're choosing not to. We're going to get this right. We're going to, for once and for all as a state, prove that we can actually help heal and not just brush things under the carpet. Like, how many reports have we had in this country that all show us, and show us horrific trauma, and every now and again everybody gets offended and upset and says things will change, and it hasn't. We still have not dealt with this as a country. The scale of abuse, the abuse and mistrust that happened, people who'd had authority and responsibility and were trusted with our children and failed to live. But we will get this right. We'll work with you. So any legislative proposals are welcome from you, and we'll hear them. But Minister Foley's going about this the right way, engaging with survivors in terms of the next steps, and nobody will get off the hook. And the mother and baby process, that's still ongoing.
Deputy Michael Collins, on behalf of the Rural Independent Group.
We're going to get this right.
Taoiseach, the debacle which was caused by the National Ambulance Service over the past weekend has to be seriously investigated. The NAS caused fury in Cork County and Kerry when they announced further reductions of services covering these areas. This effectively was leaving no ambulance cover for Skibbereen area Monday by day, no service in Castletownbere Tuesdays, no day service in Clonakilty and Bantry on Thursdays, and every second Tuesday night no services in Bantry. Also losses of day services were announced for Mallow on Monday, Mill Street on Tuesday, Macroom and Fermoy on Wednesday, Kanturk on Thursday, all announced with no consultation with staff or public by the NAS. This was nothing short of a stunning blow to these communities, which I may add, they did not take lying down and came out fighting. This decision was reversed yesterday after some swift action by us all, but leaves many questions unanswered. Our ambulance service workers working incredibly hard as they continue to save lives under enormous pressure 24/7. But morale amongst ambulance staff is at an all-time low. 5 staff with 20 years experience and 2 graded advanced paramedics have left the service in the Cork County area over the past couple of weeks. The current rollout of the ambulance service now and in the past few years has been reduced daily to an ambulance chasing service, basically getting to people's homes 3 or 4 hours after a call. When the patient's gone, his families could not bear to see a loved one lying in agony, so they take the patient in their cars or whatever transport they can find. Never a week goes by when I hear some sad and shocking stories of loved ones left waiting hours and hours for an ambulance. Only last Friday, a GA player near Cork City laid on a pitch with a suspected spinal injury for up to 2 hours waiting for an ambulance. A recent report published less than 2 weeks ago showed clearly that Cork was the worst affected area in the country, already in the state, for high priority ambulance calls that took well more than an hour to get to a patient. And instead of the NES, the Department of Health, or the Minister for Health intervening, then, to put the shocking situation right, they instead almost grinds the service to a halt. I give you a rough idea how the Castletownbere ambulance works. This is just one. Already it covers Castletownbere Peninsula, which is huge. It also sees after parts of Kerry, Kenmare, etc. It covers up as far as Newmarket and Cork, and all the way down to Goleen and Kilcrehan in West Cork. So this ambulance gets a call to Newmarket, and when they get an urgent call to Goleen, the fastest they can make it is 2 hours, 6 minutes. This ambulance, which is meant to be in Castletownbere, looking after those people, if in Newmarket gets a call to Argroom, the quickest it can make it is 1 hour, 44 minutes. And that is if they do not have a patient on board. If they do, it's another hour plus to each area. Taoiseach, I'm saying to you that heads have to roll at the National Ambulance Service. How can someone at the top who has mismanaged the ambulance service for years can still cause further havoc and walk away as if nothing has happened? The current ambulance service with people waiting 2, 3 to 4 hours is an appalling service, and I'm asking you on behalf of every person in our communities in this country to demand from the Minister for Health for him to introduce a new model ambulance service to the public that can respond to emergencies in less than 1 hour, no matter where you live in this country. Your life, Taoiseach, in this country should not be determined by where you live.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Well, thanks very much, Deputy Collins, for raising the matter. The Minister for Health became aware of this, I think, on Monday morning. The Minister for Health had intervened, as you're requesting, I think by Monday afternoon, to resolve this matter. Once this was brought to the Minister's attention, he took swift action. I commend him for that, because this never should have happened and was never the intention that it would happen as well, because as a government we have significantly increased investment in the National Ambulance Service. In fact, we've increased it by 37% since 2019. In other words, we've increased it by €63 million. The budget for the National Ambulance Service for 2024 is €231 million. When it comes to staffing levels, there's 419 additional staff working in the National Ambulance Service now than there was at the end of 2019. So tens of millions of euro of additional funding, hundreds of additional people working in the National Ambulance Service is the record of this government in terms of investment in our ambulance service as well. It is true, though, and I would like to receive those cases that you referenced there, because I think it is important that you highlight them, and I thank you for doing that, and I'm sure we would ask the National Ambulance Service to consider them in the context of how they meet the needs of our patients. The National Ambulance Service does continue to experience significant growth in demand. I think 398,000 calls were received from the public last year, which is an increase of around 14% on 2019. But despite year-on-year increases in demand, the National Ambulance Service has improved service response time further this year for what they call purple, which is cardiac life-threatening, and red, which is life-threatening call responses. And in fact, they've actually exceeded their own KPIs published in the HSE National Service Plan so far this year. So they gave a commitment in terms of response times. They have exceeded that commitment, and they'll continue to drive service improvement. To be very clear, the Minister for Health, the government, were absolutely keen to ensure that there's no reduction of emergency response ambulance services in Cork and Kerry, and I regret that there was legitimate concern around that earlier this week before the Minister intervened, and the Minister is instead examining ways to ensure welcome back, is examining ways to ensure that funding is provided so that frontline services can, of course, be maintained, and we'll continue to work with deputies in Cork and Kerry on this matter.
Taoiseach, thank you for your reply. You said that it should never have happened. This is what's happening on a weekly basis in Cork County. And from what I hear, it's happening on a weekly basis nationally. You need to step in here immediately. The public in Cork County and City and nationally deserve a 7-day ambulance service and nothing less that they can access in no more than an hour when required. There is a crisis in the ambulance service nationally, and it very much looks like, after last weekend's chaotic decision, that it is heading headless chickens are in charge of the service. There is no confidence in the senior management structure of the NES, and as I have said, staff morale is at an all-time low, as has ever been seen in 20 years for those who are working there. General managers are dancing to directors' tunes and completely ignoring staff and patients alike. There needs to be a complete wipeout of the present NES senior management, who are so caught up with power they disregard the mention of patient or patient care. Anyone who came out last weekend with cuts after such a grim report published 2 weeks previous must be removed from their positions immediately. It's been widely said in Cork County, if this was not election year, this decision would not have been reversed. I ask you again, Taoiseach, will you intervene immediately in this crisis, as the clock is ticking on people's lives, and help build a new ambulance service that staff and public can have confidence in?
Thank you very much, Deputy Collins. Taoiseach, to conclude.
Well, just to be clear, because with respect to you, and I appreciate you raising an important issue, but you gave a view in relation to confidence, and nobody has confidence, etc., etc. I have confidence in the head of the National Ambulance Service, Robert Morton. I have confidence in the management of the National Ambulance Service. I have confidence in the people working in the National Ambulance Service, and I base that. Thank you for your intervention. And I base that on the fact that when people give commitments to what their targets are going to be for the year and exceed the commitments, that is a good sign. So you talk about the cases, and you're right to highlight them, Deputy, and I don't in any way dismiss them. But when it comes to the published KPIs for National Ambulance Service targets for purple and red calls, life-threatening calls and cardiac life-threatening calls, the National Ambulance Service has exceeded those targets. And to the end of July, 76% of calls in the purple area were being responded to within 19 minutes. So I can understand when something goes wrong, you want to highlight that case, and you should, and we should continue to improve services. But this is an area where we have actually genuinely improved service times. There's a lot of innovation going on in the National Ambulance Service, new services, the use of advanced paramedics, new training models, and we'll continue to invest and support them and look forward to doing more in the next HSE service.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Last but by no means least, Deputy Michael Fitzmaurice on behalf of the Independent Group.
Margaret Concorda and Taoiseach, first of all, on a different matter, I want to welcome your announcement the other day on Lochfinchen that the Umbrella is getting before Friday the application. I know it's 3 weeks late, but I hope that it can be expedited as soon as possible, but I do welcome it. That's the first thing I want to say. Taoiseach, this evening we're having a debate about the Apple tax, and we're talking about fair sums of money in the budget. But a problem that arises is that money doesn't solve every problem. I met Sean and Kevin in late 2022, a father and son, where the son is severely autistic, non-verbal. And the son, unfortunately, doesn't sleep only short times and goes out to the kitchen, could wreck the house, could go out, wreck the car. The father has other siblings, younger children who, unfortunately, and it's not Sean's fault, would have encountered difficult situations with them. We engaged the services. We went through all the process that you're to go through the HSE. I've brought it up to your colleague, former Taoiseach Varadkar. I've brought it to Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin in here twice over the last 2 years. And we have had numerous meetings with the HSE, Brothers of Charity, and was promised the sun, moon and stars. And ironically, it's not money. I remember where we were promised respite, and it came for a while and then it disappeared. Sean was tried out in a new place to see how he'd go, unfortunately because of his situation, but he's hand through a window. They just, because they're private operators, says, no, don't want it. But we were promised that the minute Sean became 18 years an adult, because there was no place before that Sean would have a place this July. And we went to meetings with the Brothers of Charity and the HSE since January. In January, in fairness to Minister Rabbitte, and in fairness to a person in the west of Ireland that's over it, I won't go naming them, they're a civil servant, the money was granted from the HSE for this. We had 3 meetings with the Brothers of Charity. We talked about houses in 3 places. They told us how they had to get them ready. We said, fine. Will you stick with us? Yes, we will. So this kept going on since last February or March. Sean was going to be an adult in July. July came, they says, well, we're not ready yet now. We have to decide on what house. This will take a few more months and it'll be gradual. And then we got a bomb thrown at us where the Brothers of Charity chief wrote to the father and said, we're going to send the money back to the HSE. We're not going to do this service anymore. What has gone on with the Brothers of Charity, and I'm not talking about, I'm not criticising the person that granted the money. The money is being granted by the HSE. But what's going on in the charitable sectors at the moment for people that have disabilities is pathetic. The way that youngster has been treated is pathetic. He has been dropped. His father had to bring him to A&E in Galway Monday. Roscommon Hospital Psychiatric wouldn't take him, where the house has been absolutely wrecked in the last few days.
All right, Deputy.
Galway said, bring him home, we have no bed. Is that the Ireland that we look at treating people that has disabilities? Or are we going to change it and tell people you have a job to do, you deliver? It's not about money, it's about delivery. And it's scandalous what that father has gone through.
Thank you, Deputy Fitzmaurice. Taoiseach.
I want to thank Deputy Fitzmaurice for raising this important matter. Firstly, in relation to Loch Funchion, I want to thank him for the constructive engagement he's had with government on this matter, and I am genuinely pleased that Roscommon County Council intend to submit this planning application to An Bord Pleanála this week. I've been in the homes of the people impacted. It's quite horrific, and the fear they're living with, and we'll all continue to work closely on that. And I'm conscious winter is coming, and we'll work together on it. And I thank Minister O'Donnell for his work and Roscommon County Council. But look, you've raised a very serious issue in relation to Sean, and I'd ask that we talk further about it after, because I have a big long note here, and I can read it all out about all the extra investment that we're making in disability services, and I appreciate the excellent work being done by my colleague Minister Anne Rabbitte in this area, as you've acknowledged too. But in many ways, the story you've told hits the nail on the head in terms of, regardless of money, regardless of investment, young people and not so young people getting lost in trying to navigate a system where it seems to be centred around everybody other than the person with the disability. And that's why we have genuinely set up a new Cabinet Committee on Disability. That's why I'm chairing it myself, and it's why we're trying to bring everybody around the table to see how, when we make decisions in relation to investment, that investment's actually going to where we expect it to go in terms of improving service delivery. And I know this is something that Minister Rabbitte is absolutely passionate about, because year on year we're increasing significantly, as we should, the amount of money that we're putting into disability. Year on year we're giving the go-ahead to increase staff. We're talking more and more to organisations about what we can do. We're trying to rectify issues that Section 39 disability organisations meet, including their increased pay to staff, an issue that they were campaigning on for ages. We've taken measures as a government to address that 8% increase, and yet we still hear of situations in relation to Sean where, despite an allocation by government to help support him, he finds himself without a service as well. So I think the best thing I can do, Ceann Comhairle, is ask Minister Rabbitte to engage directly with Deputy Fitzmaurice on Sean's case, as I will too. But I think the reason you're highlighting is not just in advocating for Sean, but also I think in highlighting a broader issue in terms of the level of reform that we do need to drive and will drive in return for increased investment. We're not going to just be able to keep writing cheques without actually asking what impactful difference is this making to the lives of people with a disability.
Deputy Fitzmaurice.
Taoiseach, the problem appears to be that if something is a difficult case, that whatever the provider, they will decide, well, look, this is too much hassle, we'll throw the money back, and that's what's going on. And what we have to have is that people start being responsible for the jobs they have at hand. The facts are at the moment that if you're under 18 years of age, there's really no place to go. We tried everything for that youngster. It is such a sad story. When that youngster became an adult, the choices that's facing parents at the moment is that you go to A&E and you drop them off and you disown them. That's an awful thing to have to say, to try and get residential care. Or you go to the forecourts down the road. Them are the two choices that parents have at the moment. And I see so many parents, and I'm not talking about, this instance has an intellectual disability, but there are some people that need help. Parents have looked after their youngsters for many years. They've got older, and they are worried before they pass on, that there be some place to look after those people. And at the moment, We have no place in this country to help those people. I would ask you, Taoiseach, I have liaised with Minister Rabbitte. This isn't about Minister Rabbitte or about the person in the HSE in the west of Ireland. This is about a charity that's getting a lot of money, taxpayers' money, that aren't prepared to do the graft. They have told us blatant lies, and now they said, we'll throw back the money and we'll leave you high and dry. That's not acceptable.
Well, look, I can hear the passion in your voice in terms of the situation you're working your way through, and I do think it highlights a broader issue around how you empower the person with a disability and their family in terms of the budget that the state allocates to them. And I know Minister Rabbitte and Minister O'Gorman and others have done work in relation to this. I mean, rather than just funding the charity or the service provider, that model of actually funding the individual in terms of a personalised budget has been transformative in some areas, where you say to the young person, or again the not so young person or their family if that arises, you actually say, well look, the state is funding you, you're now empowered, rather than actually saying, here you go charity X or here you go charity Y. So let's look further at what we can do more in relation to that model. I can tell you, and I do just want to say this, I mean there are places, obviously, in terms of residential places, and I do say that to parents following this today. We have allocated more money this year, 15.5 million this year, for an additional 100 priority 1 residential placements nationally. But you're quite right to highlight the issue. The demographic pressures are real in relation to this. We had a very good roundtable recently, Minister O'Gorman, Mr Rabbitte, myself, with all disability organisations and many disability representative groups in advance of Budget 2025, and we'll reflect on your comments in relation to that and liaise directly on Sean.
An announcement. I wish to announce for the information of the House that I received a letter of resignation on the 27th of August from Joe Carey as a member of Dáil Éireann for the constituency of Clare. In accordance with the provisions of Standing Order 230, the resignation took effect upon receipt of the letter. I'm sure we all want to join with extending our very best wishes to Joe, who has had some significant health issues, to him and his family and the challenges that lie ahead. He was a great colleague, a good friend to many people here, and we wish him well, a return to health and happiness in the future. Now, order of business. In accordance with Standing Order 35, must call on the Chief Whip, Mr Hildegarde Naughton, to move that the arrangements for this week's business be agreed to. Is that agreed? Not agreed. Deputy Paul Murphy, Deputy Patrick. Yeah.
Both the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach have told the Dáil that Irish sovereign airspace has not been used to transport weapons to Israel. We know now from the journalism of the Ditch that that is not the case, that at least 6 flights have flown through Irish sovereign airspace containing munitions on their way to Israel. Either the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach misled the Dáil, or exemptions were not sought and were therefore not granted, in which case the law was broken. Either way, it's a very, very serious matter, and we should have debate in the Dáil this week on it.
Taoiseach, I very much welcome your government's commitment to establishing a commission of investigation in the wake of the awful revelations about abuse of children in religious-run schools, as illustrated in Mary O'Toole's scoping inquiry, and I want to pay tribute to Mark and David Ryan too. But I wonder, can we have clarity from you as to the timing? When will your government be introducing those terms of reference, given that we're all conscious this Dáil has a very limited time frame to run? When will we have those terms of reference? And furthermore, can we have a debate on another really serious incidence of abuse in a different religious-run institution, a hospital, and I'm speaking of Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital in Drogheda, and the appalling case of Dr. Michael Shine, convicted abuser. Myself and Deputy Jed Nash, who's worked on this for a long time on this issue, we met last week with some of the survivors of abuse perpetrated by Dr. Shine, and we are conscious that there are about 300 people who've come forward. This was a religious-run hospital. The Medical Missionaries of Mercy ran the hospital. There has not been, at this point, any indication from you or your government as to whether you would support the holding of a scoping exercise akin to that carried out by Mary O'Toole, or indeed the establishment of a commission of investigation. I think, given the short time frame we're all working within, we'd like clarity from you on those issues.
Deputy Keane O'Callaghan.
Taoiseach, you've claimed that 40,000 new build homes will be completed this year. A report from the Central Bank published this morning rubbishes your claim and says that you'll be 8,000 homes short. So do you accept the findings of the Central Bank report? And given that there's another report out today showing that house prices have increased by 10%, will you provide time in the last 12 months, will you provide time this week to discuss these reports and indeed the Housing Commission report that was published last May and is still not being discussed in the Dáil?
Deputy Matter McGrath.
I welcome your statement on the bike shed, and I understood from discussions at our business meeting that a party leader asked here for another bike shed to be built in the front yard of Vincent House. Maybe we could get clarity on that. Taoiseach, the situation with Irish Water is just untenable. This was an outfit set up by Minister Hogan and your government. I have situations all over Tipperary, but especially in Ballinareha and Kilsheelan, in Killavin in Emily, where they have no water for 6 weeks. A 90-year-old man in Kilsheelan drawing water with churns and barrels to cattle. I mean, it's primitive, it's disgraceful, and we can't get meetings with senior management, we can't get engagement. I do thank Canon Ferris for engaging with me, but we can't get meeting with engineers. Thinking around with problems, don't have information, won't meet the people, or won't engage with people who know the knowledge, their workers included. It's an untenable situation, and we need an urgent debate in this House about the inability of Irish Water to provide water to people and farms. And indeed, the town of Clonmel is an appalling situation. It's in a hollow, it should never be without water, but it's experiencing ongoing problems with water all the time.
Deputy Pádraig McLaughlin.
Taoiseach, I want to support the request from Deputy Murphy. There's been report after report of the use of Irish sovereign airspace to transport munitions, to be used in the genocide of the Palestinian people and all of the issues that flow from that. This has caused widespread concern amongst the Irish people, and we don't have clarification from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, from the Minister of Transport, about what are the actions that follow from the Irish government, how seriously they're taking this matter. It's a grave abuse of our sovereignty, and we need to have statements of clarification. So I agree with Deputy Murphy, and it needs to happen this week.
Deputy Thomas Sprinkle.
The independent group as well, I would like to support those calls for a debate on the use of Irish airspace by the Israelis, because it seems to be that the government is operating on the basis of that if you don't ask, you won't get an answer, and that's the best way to do it. And we need to address that, and we need to address that very quickly. So I would support a debate this week.
Taoiseach, please.
Thanks very much. Can I just be associated, Ceann Corda, with your comments relating to former Deputy Joe Carey, and to wish him, his wife Grace and his family all the very best, and to thank him for his service to this House, to my party and to the people of County Clare. Look, my understanding is there was no dissent at the Business Committee to the order of business, but look, new season, same old, that's okay. So people have raised a number of issues here, which of course we're happy to consider how best to facilitate these issues through the Business Committee. In relation to the issue regarding the use of Irish airspace, I mean, to be clear, under Irish law, the air navigation carriage of munitions of war, weapons and dangerous goods orders 1973 and 1989, it is expressly prohibited for civil aircraft to carry munitions of war in Irish sovereign territory without being granted an exemption to do so by the Minister for Transport. In 2023 and to date in 2024, no applications have been received or exemptions granted for the carriage of munitions of war on civil aircraft to a point in Israel. In considering any application for such an exemption in respect to munitions of war, the Department of Transport will consult with the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Justice on applications to determine if there are foreign policy or security considerations. And this is a robust process, and as the Minister for Transport has said, no exemptions were requested, and he is engaging with the company, and I will ask him to update the House when he has information. But the position of government, the position of the people of Ireland is very clear in relation to wanting an immediate ceasefire, the bloodshed and the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza to end. In relation to Deputy Batchik, and look, I think they're two very fair questions. Being very honest, I don't have a specific answer in terms of the timing, in terms of the Commission of Investigation, and that's not that we don't wish to move on this. We do with absolute vigour, but we want to get it right, and government has, I think quite rightly, empowered Minister Foley to take that time to engage with the survivors, and let's try and get this process right, because I do believe the next step is really important. If we get the process wrong, I think we will have failed. We will have failed survivors, so we need to try and get that right. In relation to Shine, I mean, a vile paedophile who has destroyed the lives of many people in this country. Be clear in relation to that. My colleague, the Minister for Health, is in consultation with the Attorney General in relation to the publication of the report, and we're happy to keep the House updated in relation to that and potential next steps. Deputy O'Callaghan, the Central Bank of Ireland does very important work. I respect its forecasts. Lots of people provide forecasts, but we have beaten their forecasts over the last 2 years. Just to be very clear, we're consistently beating their forecasts. In fact, in their Q3 bulletin last year, they forecast 30,000. We delivered 32,695. In their Q3 forecast the year before, they predicted 23,500. We delivered 29,851. We're getting well used to beating forecasts. We'll beat it this year as well. And the Department of Housing and the Minister for Housing tell me we are on track to deliver up to 40,000 homes. That is what we want to get to this year. In relation to housing, and I respect there's consistent calls for a debate on the Housing Commission report and the likes. Government's happy to facilitate that, but we need to do that through the Business Committee. Through the Business Committee. Well, welcome back, lads. It's your first day back, so we'll facilitate it. Not one of you thought this at the Business Committee. So for those watching the theatrics at home, none of you dissented to the order of business. And you come in here and you go, why are we not having a debate on housing? Because you didn't raise it. So please do that. Please do that next week, and we'll endeavour to facilitate it. But come on now, come on. We'll call a vote and you'll be upset about the business, but none of you bothered dissenting at the meeting. Like, let's have a little bit of fairness and give and take here. And Deputy McGrath, your commitment to investment in water services is something we share. Government is very keen that we want to do more in relation to water. I think Irish Water as a vehicle is delivering, but I do think investing more in its ability to deliver is something we want to look at. We've made clear our views around the potential to do that through a variety of once-off resources that may be available to the country.
I'm now putting the question. The question is that the proposed arrangements for the week's business be agreed to. Are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you. On the yes, Deputy. Yes,
Deputy. Please.
Yeah.
John, it's fairly hard for any deputy in here to get elected, and it's for each deputy it is a difficult ordeal. But notwithstanding that, it's fairly easy enough to come up from Kerry. All the road up, there's no restriction. But it's getting increasingly more difficult to come into this building now, because on my way, I went out of the Dáil and I wanted to come back up to Molesworth Street. I was denied access to come up that way. I had to go around. I gave my identification. I said I knew me anyway. But, I mean, it has gone beyond now. There's more barriers around this place, and it's harder to get in here and to get out of it as well. So I want some investigation how a deputy could be stopped on his way coming into the Dáil, because it don't seem right to me.